What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. He's Anthony SanFilippo. This is Phillies Stoplight. The Phillies take 2 out of 3 from the Mets this weekend. They leave this series in first place, and all things considered, Saturday obviously was an ugly game, but you win big Friday and Sunday. I think you'll take that.
You absolutely will take it, especially after getting swept by the Mets earlier this season. And you really take it because, Tim, it was just 9 days ago that this team was 5.5 games out of first place. Now they come 9 days later and they are going into Houston up a game. So they've actually gone 6.5 games in 9 days. That's something you really will take at this point in the season. The Houston series coming up will be the halfway point. So you are literally going into the halfway point of the season up a game in the standings. And the Phillies looked really good. Even in the game that they lost yesterday, they weren't terrible offensively, but I really like the fact that they hit the ball. Yeah. And they used it's amazing how this team, whenever they go bad, it's because they can't use the whole field, right? They get very pull happy. Yeah. But when they decide to go opposite field or up the middle, all of a sudden they're getting 10, 11 hits a game. They put the ball out of the ballpark. They hit for extra bases. It changes the entire dynamic of the Phillies, and we've been seeing it, for about 2 weeks now that they've played this way. And I think that they really took advantage of the Mets pitching being down. Mets have a bunch of pitching injuries, and the Phillies didn't let a bunch of no-name guys beat them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, you talk about the right-handers that have been going for a few weeks. Otto Kemp now would fall into that category. JT Realmuto, Nick Castellanos, they've all hit well. But Edmundo Sosa comes in tonight and has a huge night, and he's just one of those guys. He's not an everyday player necessarily, but the Phillies are at their best when he's at his best, when he's going. There's a reason Zach Wheeler called him one of his favorite players in the league. Like, anytime you ask a Philly about Edmundo Sosa, they all rave. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him. When he is in there and all, locked in as he was tonight, I mean, that's one of the longest home runs, opposite field home runs I've seen a right-hander hit to that part of this.
How about if I told you it is the second longest opposite field home run hit by a right-hander in Citizens Bank Park since they've been measuring on StatCast?
I did not set that up. That was completely organic.
And do you know who had the longest? If you pull this, I'm walking off set.
Edmundo Sosa.
Yeah. Jorge Alfaro in 2008.
That actually doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
The raw power of Jorge Alfaro was insane.
Yeah.
But Edmundo Sosa, that was huge, and you're going to start to see some more lefties, including in this Houston series, which we'll get to in a minute. But when he's going, they're in a really good spot. So beyond that from this series, what also stands out to me is coming into this year, I thought this was a division that would probably have at least 2 playoff teams, and it would take 95 to 97 wins to win this division. I don't know that I necessarily believe that in either case anymore. I think there's a real chance it has 2 playoff teams. I think there's almost no chance it has 3 playoff teams. But I now look at this as a division where it's going to be 92 or 93 wins, and maybe the second place team wins 90 games and gets a wild card spot. But this to me is not a year where you need to win 97 to 100 games to win the division.
No, you won't have to win that many to win the division, although I do still think it's possible to have 95 plus and win the division. But I think you're right. I think if you're going to look for what's the gap between first place and second place, if second place is a 90-win team or a 91-win team, yes, you only need 92, 93 to win this division, right? And I think but that's okay. I mean, that's fine. Obviously, a lot has gone wrong with the Atlanta Braves, and that only benefits the Phillies as well. So, just to go one last note on Sosa. Do you know in the games that he started this year, he's hit 309?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's another thing. It's just really kind of an interesting thing. I think he started, this was his 29th start tonight out of 79 games or whatever it is that they played. So, I mean, he's not like he's starting regularly, but, that when he's in there as a starter, I think he does his job very, very well.
Yeah, and I was talking to somebody about this before the game, that Sosa hasn't been great of late, but I said it's one of those things where I know at some point he's going to have another hot streak. It's just a matter of when, and maybe he's about to enter that. And to me, he's somebody that you ride during those hot streaks. He's not going to be an everyday player. People once or twice a year try to will that discussion into being a thing because he gets too cold and chases too much when he's not right. But when he is right, I think you get him into that lineup as much as you can. Bryson Stott's looked a little bit better the last few weeks, but it's certainly not like you don't have a chance to put Edmundo. Like, no, you don't have Chase Utley at second base. You don't have someone there that is like locked into that spot. If Edmundo Sosa's hot, even if it means playing against some righties, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And one other thing before we move on to the next topic, Jesus Luzardo, really good game tonight. 6 2/3, doesn't allow a run. Only 3 hits, I believe, at the time that he left the game. And he has been sensational this year against good teams.
Yeah.
He's really done. He's pitched 4 games against the Dodgers, the Cubs, and the Mets. And he's allowed, I think it's 1 run or something like that in 23 or 2/3 innings. Really, really good against good teams. I asked him about it after the game, and he said, you know what? You want to have juice for every game, but sometimes when you play these teams like this and you're on national television, maybe you have a little bit more juice for those. And so good on him, and that's a good thing because he's never pitched in an environment like this before. And so if you're thinking about down the line and maybe making the playoffs and have him pitch in a game against good teams and needing that juice, he obviously is a guy you can bring.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, Matt Gelb kind of brought this up to him post-game, that he having pitched in Oakland and then Miami, like I don't think he's ever pitched on Sunday Night Baseball. He did pitch in the playoffs one time here, ironically, a few years ago, but in general hasn't had these big moments, hasn't had to kind of go with the grind of having 20 media members there covering you every day, dissecting everything. I'm interested to see All-Star Game-wise if he ends up in or not, because he has 2 awful, atrocious starts, and outside of that, I mean, he wasn't great in Miami last week, but in general, outside of that, he's been top 5 pitcher in baseball this season. So I am interested to see that. Now, speaking of pitchers who we think will factor into this season, Andrew Painter was an interesting topic pregame on Sunday, and I didn't necessarily expect him to be, because it went beyond just Rob giving some analysis of his last start. There was kind of this, and maybe I'm reading too far into this, but there's kind of this sense I got that the Phillies want to make clear he is going to come up here when he kicks the door in, basically. Dave Dombrowski forever has talked about July-ish, could be June, could be August. I feel like we've heard that statement 1,000 times. But obviously at this point he's not coming up in June, and I thought coming into the season for sure he's going to be up in July. I'm not sure I believe that right now, and it might only take 1 injury or something like that, but I do think the Phillies are making clear. Painter made his 8th start for Lehigh Valley Saturday. He's got a 4.25 ERA. He struck out 40 batters but allowed 34 hits in 36 innings, and I think the Phillies are making clear they're not going to bring him up just to bring him up. If he's not ready, and he's only 22 years old, so it's not the worst thing in the world if he's at AAA. If he's not ready, then he'll just keep pitching for the Iron Pig. Yeah,
I mean, I think that you're right about that, but I do think that there is one scenario that could lead to him getting here sooner. And that's dependent upon Mick Abel.
Yeah.
And Mick Abel obviously didn't have a good start yesterday. He's getting pushed back a day, as well as Christopher Sanchez getting pushed back a day. So Abel's not going to pitch until next Friday when the Phillies play the Braves. We asked Rob about this pregame about Painter's schedule, and he originally said, oh yeah, he's pitching Thursday. And then I said, well, it's going on 4 days rest again. Is that something that like is going to be a thing going forward? And he goes, nah, he might be pitching Saturday.
Yeah.
so we don't know when he's pitching.
He's got a lot of stuff to keep track of.
Right. He doesn't know exactly when he's pitching. Thursday, Saturday, maybe Friday. Who knows?
He might need a packet.
Yeah, he might. He might need a packet after every series. But the reality of it is that I think if Mick Abel continues to struggle, they may sit there and go, okay, let's not have him go completely bad.
Yeah.
Let's get Andrew Painter up here and see what he can do, and kind of try and keep Abel, feeling good about himself, even if he has a couple of bad starts.
Feeling good, and also the rest of the league feeling good about him, because I'm not saying he will be traded, but I don't think it's a 0% chance. And if he comes out over the month of July and has a 7 ERA, not going to help his trade value. So just something to consider there. But I think this stuff with Andrew Painter is interesting. Like I asked Rob Thompson, do you stay in touch with him more than you would with a typical AAA player? And he said no. Andrew Painter is not getting like special treatment in terms of he's traveling to all the games, he's riding the bus, all that stuff that comes at AAA. So I guess it felt like coming into the year, like he was not going to be anointed, but he was going to come in, be amazing, kind of what Paul Skeens did last year. He's been fine. I mean, a 4.25 ERA is not good, but it's not horrific either. I don't have any questions that Andrew Painter's still going to be a really good pitcher, but it's maybe not coming as quickly as possible. And I don't know that that's like the worst thing in the world, because looking back at how some other guys have recovered from Tommy John, Zach Wheeler basically took 3 years until he was right again. So Andrew Painter's pitched well enough that they pushed him to AAA. He's had some good moments there. Just still seems to need some refining.
Yeah, he does, and he had that one rough start, and I think that's what kind of pulled his ERA up. I mean, you look at Luzardo, you talk about how great he's been all year for the Phillies, other than those 2 starts. He, as good as he's been the last couple starts, well, today and the other starts we talked about, he's still got an ERA over 4.
Yeah.
Right, it's 4.08. So Painter's not made as many starts, certainly not pitching as many innings. They've been kind of managing his innings a little bit, so that ERA is going to probably be a little bit higher. I do think that overall they're pretty happy with where he is right now, but I do think you're right. There is still some refinement that's needed, and if the pitchers at the major league level can afford him the time to refine, then I think that he's going to continue to stay down there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's not a rush. Like, even if Mick Abel isn't pitching well, he's your number 5 starter. Your top 4 is probably the best in the league. So you're in a position that almost no other team in the league would be, in the sense that you can be patient with him. If he has to spend the whole year at AAA, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world, because you have this. Aaron Nola at some point is going to come back. I really don't think Aaron Nola is just done. I feel like there's still something more from Aaron Nola. So you have pitching depth. You're not in a pinch there. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
And just a quick note on Nola, he threw in the cage. And so as long as he comes out of that okay for tomorrow, the next thing is when they get to Houston, he's going to throw outdoors on flat ground from a little bit further. So he's starting to feel a little bit better. I still think
quicker than I thought, honestly.
Yeah, I do too. But I still think you're probably looking at early August.
Yeah, because you're going to have to make at least 2 rehab appearances.
Yeah, at least 2, I would think. Yeah.
So there is that. Anthony mentioned it. They're headed to not Minute Maid Park, Dalkin Park, is that the new name now?
I still call it
Enron.
Minute Maid Enron.
I'm not a fan of that park, but really, I'm a fan of the pitching matchup Tuesday. Ranger Suarez against Framber Valdez, 2 of the best free agents that are going to be available this offseason. Both have a chance to be all-stars. Ranger Suarez maybe will get dinged for April, but Valdez is going to be heading there, and there's no question that Rangers pitched that way since coming off the IL. Game 2, Zach Wheeler against Colton Gordon. And then Game 3 is another matchup of potential all-stars. Christopher Sanchez quietly has been really good. 8 innings last start. He's going against Hunter Brown, who, outside of Tarek Skubal and Garrett Crochet, has maybe been the best pitcher in the American League this season. So Game 2, clearly the Phillies have the advantage, but the other 2 pitching matchups are really good.
Yeah, no, they are. And you face a couple of lefties there, and so it's going to be curious to see. Rob was asked before the game, you're going to see the lineup we saw tonight, which was all the righties going against those lefties, and he didn't commit to all of them. But I do think you're going to see at least, obviously Otto Kemp's playing against everybody, but I think you might get a chance to see Brandon Marsh give a shot against lefties. At least one game there. I think Stott will get a chance against a lefty. I'm not sure Kepler will. That's the one that I'm still not sure on. But it's going to be a good match. And the Astros have been playing good baseball. It's a funky ballpark, although
and that's why
I miss Tal's Hill.
I've always said their punishment for the sign stealing scandal should have been they had to put Tal's Hill back. But it's a park to me that's like too quirky for its own good, and they got rid of the coolest quirk of it.
Yeah.
I also miss the oranges in the train now. It's just baseballs because they're not Minute Maid anymore. But in terms of the quirkiness of the park, the Crawford boxes in left field, that's why I'm not entirely sure whether Otto Kemp will be in left field against the lefties, how that's going to work. Because among Boston and that would probably be the hardest parks. There's not a ton of room in left field, but if it hits off that wall or goes into the the bullpen, the visiting bullpen area in left center, which is like a dungeon almost. It's got to be extremely difficult to field at that park. So that would kind of be where I question whether Otto Kemp is going to be in left field or at first base in some of those games. I do think Edmundo Sosa, if he's playing like this, they're going to find a way to put him into the lineup. But it should be a fun series. Astros are playing well, but it's weird. Like, Alvarez is out. Jose Altuve's not had a good year. Christian Walker's been a disaster to this point. So it feels like they haven't necessarily hit their stride completely either.
No, they haven't, but they're at the top of that American League West, right?
Yeah.
Which is a weird division. I mean, the Mariners being paced by a guy on a record pace in Cal Raleigh, and they have really good pitching, and yet they're still behind the Astros.
Yeah.
The Rangers should be a better team, and they're not. I don't know why they're not doing well. And then, of course, you have the Angels and the A's at the back end of it. So the Astros, despite the fact that they're not maybe as good as they were in 2022 and they beat the Phillies in the World Series, they're still at the top of their division. So it's still a good team, still a winning team. But the Phillies are now doing well against winning teams. I think they're now 23-20 on the year against teams with winning records. So, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good record to have when you're going up against other winning teams.
Do you associate that, or have you accepted the Astros in the American League yet, or are you still...
Well, you got to remember, I grew up with the Astros in the National League and the Brewers in the American League, and now it's flopped. So, yeah, I've kind of accepted it.
What was that? How did they have 6 teams in one division and 4? That was insane that they were just doing that. It's very weird.
There was a lot of stupidity. Well, you got to remember, when I grew up, it was National League was 2 divisions of 6, and the American League was 2 divisions of 7. Yeah. So
I hope they never change the current format. I hate some of the ideas of realigning divisions. I like the current NL East. I think there's good rivalries. I would not change that. Hopefully you don't change that. You will continue reading on Pattison. That's going to do it for this episode of Phillies Stoplight, though. I'm Tim Kelly. He's Anthony SanFilippo. We'll talk to you guys next time.